Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Gnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Himate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namini. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarini. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा welcome to our Saturday satsang program. So we're going to actually we started with the introduction of Srimad Bhagavatam last week, and last week our dear Guru Maharaj was in Bangalore, so we couldn't have class. So today, so before we can start with Bhagavatam, we have to actually understand various instructions that Krishna has given in Bhagavad Gita. So what I thought was that before we can start, I will go through summary study of Bhagavad Gita. Summary study means that we will go through all the important instructions that Krishna has given in Bhagavad Gita. And what I would encourage all of you is to try and make some notes, at least of important points that, and okay, so just taking a step back, what is the idea of why Krishna has given all these instructions? Krishna has given these instructions so that we can actually follow them. And how do we follow them? For us to follow something, first we have to remember. So the way to remember is to make notes. So you can all kindly make some notes, maybe your mobile, whatever you are comfortable with, because otherwise it might not be very useful. These sessions might not be very beneficial. Okay, so with that background, so this notes that I have prepared is from all the chapters in Bhagavad Gita. So we will go chapter by chapter. Okay, so the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita is almost like setting the scene. It's just both armies are there. So the Pandavas wanted to avoid the war, but Duryodhana was very bent upon having the war. He did not even want to give land big enough for a needle to go in. Just imagine one needle. If you drive a needle into the ground, how much space will it take? Even that much land he was not willing to give Pandavas. Krishna also tried to. He became a messenger. He came and so that it can be peacefully settled. But Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana were not in the mind for any peaceful settlement, so they wanted the war. And then, of course, why did Krishna appear? Paritranaya sadhuna vinashaya cha dushkrutam. Vinashaya cha dushkrutam. All the dushkrutis, all the bad elements, evil people in this world, Krishna wanted to eliminate. So his plan was to have the battle of Kurukshetra, and where there will be mass destruction. So both the armies, so all armies, kings from all over the planet, basically they came and they were divided between Kauravas and Pandavas, and all the army they were waiting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra for the battle to begin. Of course, unlike today's times, right, where war is just, you can launch a missile by sitting in the comfort of your room. Previously, it was not like that. So all of them had to come physically. It's not like the king sent only their soldiers and they were relaxing somewhere. So everybody was present, and war has to be announced, as in the beginning of the war has to be announced, and it is normally announced by blowing conch shells and trumpets and all these different instruments. So as soon as Duryodhana sees the Pandava army, he is surprised because he didn't expect them to have so much of support, because they were in the forest, then they were incognito without anybody recognizing them. So his calculation was, yeah, they're not in touch with any of the kings, so they will have a very small army, and Kauravas will just finish them in no time, and then end of story. So as soon as Duryodhana saw the army of the Pandavas, he was surprised, and suddenly fear overtook him because he was not prepared. So he suddenly went to Dronacharya and he speaks to Dronacharya in a very sarcastic way. Um, Unlike how a student should talk to teacher, because Dronacharya was Duryodhana's guru, and he points out Dronacharya's mistake in training Drishtadyumna, who was Draupadi's brother, mm, Drupada's son, uh, saying, "Why did you train him? Because you trained him. Now he is actually set up, this whole military phalanx." So previously there used to be formations, various formations that the armies used to kind of organize themselves in certain formations, which would make it formidable for the enemy. So he's telling Dronacharya, saying, "See, you trained. He is now, your own disciple is now against you." Of course, I mean, Duryodhana's idea was that he wanted to make sure that Dronacharya and Bhishma, specifically, that their support is available for him, because if Bhishma and Drona are insurmountable, I mean, um, nobody can defeat them. So he wanted to make sure that that he has full support of them. Mm. So he was trying to just create some anger in Dronacharya so that he can give up any attachment or any affection he had towards Pandavas. So then Bhishma blows his conch shell. Then Krishna, Arjuna, everybody, Yudhishthira, everybody blow their conch shells, and then the war is announced. So just before the war was about to begin, Arjuna tells Krishna, "Ratham sthapayame achyuta." He says, "Can you kindly take my chariot and place them before the two armies? I want to see who all have come to fight to support the evil-minded son of Dhritarashtra." And Krishna knew what was going on in Arjuna's mind. So he kind of smiles, you know, he smiles and then takes the chariot between the two armies. And when he takes the chariot between the two armies, Arjuna suddenly sees, he knew already, but he wanted to see by his own eyes. And he goes there and he sees all these, his gurus, his elders, uncles, grandsons, sons, cousin, nephews, uncles, everybody, and he's completely taken aback. So this is the beginning of this is the scene there. Arjuna is overwhelmed by, he gives 5 reasons why he should not be fighting. Okay, so this is where all the instructions for us from Bhagavad Gita start. So the first is the list of reasons, or what Krishna subsequently calls impurities. So these are, and okay, before we get into this, So we should understand saying that we should hear Bhagavad Gita just as Arjuna heard. Like we should put ourselves in the shoes of Arjuna, because Arjuna's situation and our situation is non-different. So we will understand how Arjuna also expressed reasons why he was not wanting to fight, which were based on his own sense of sense gratification, as in he wanted to. So let's go through these reasons that he gives for not fighting. So first, he is overcome with compassion. He looks at those armies and he knows that he's very strong and so many people are going to get killed. So he's overcome with compassion. Oh, why should I kill my own kinsmen? So this is the first reason. Second reason is he's talking about we do everything for getting good fortune, but this war seems to be just a reason for misfortune. So why should I fight? I don't want to fight if this is going to result in misfortune. Third reason, he says, even after the battle, it's not going to result in any happiness. I'm not going to be happy because all the people with whom I want to enjoy will be dead. So with whom am I going to enjoy this property, this kingdom? So I'm not going to be happy. So if I'm not going to be happy, why should I do? And fourth, he says that this is actually sinful. To kill elders, etc., is sinful. So sin will overcome us. So I don't want to fight. And then he also says that one who knows dharma, he should not engage in adharma. It looks like Kauravas don't know what is dharma and adharma, but we know. So why should we engage in this battle? So if you see all these reasons, so compassion, misfortune, happiness, sin will overcome us, and live a dharmic life. In Kali Yuga, if you see the last two reasons, people don't bother. Dharmic life, sin will overcome us. Nobody's bothered about it. But Arjuna was bothered, and that's how it should be. One should be concerned about dharma and adharma. One should know what is dharma is, what is adharma is. So Krishna subsequently says in the later chapters of Bhagavad Gita, saying that a demoniac person doesn't know what is dharma and what is adharma. He doesn't know what needs to be done, what should not be done. But one who is not, one who thinks he's not a demon, he should know what is right, what is wrong, and live life accordingly. Also, one should have in every action that a person does, he should be worried whether he's doing sin or whether it is acceptable. So these two things are important. Now, most people in Kali Yuga live based on mostly one main reason amongst these three: compassion, misfortune, happiness, or two of them. Compassion also, no, most people are self-centered. They're not really bothered about anybody else. But most people are worried about my happiness and my good luck or good fortune for me. So these are the only two reasons on the basis of which people take decisions in their life. And Krishna is calling all of these as impurities. We'll understand why later. So point for us to note from a practical application is that we should not unnecessarily get stuck in material compassion. We'll explain what these are. We should, so okay, maybe we'll discuss that. So Arjuna was very materially attached to his family and gurus and elders, etc. So his compassion was on material grounds, saying that these are people I know, why should I kill them? Now, but if the same thing was with some people he didn't know, he would have very readily fought. So he became soft-hearted because of this bodily relationship. So this whole thing, all his reasons for not fighting were based on this bodily relationship. Family, society, relations, etc., etc. So it's important for us to not get stuck in this, because Arjuna got stuck in these: material compassion, material fortune, misfortune, material happiness, And of course, then he was concerned about sin and adharma, which are not bad. I mean, it's good to consider those. But it was because of these reasons that he decided not to fight. Because it was based on the bodily platform, Krishna called these as impurities. Right? Because these are impurities, because these have nothing to do with Krishna or relationship with Krishna. These are purely material. And mostly, if you see, most people in this world also are affected because of these material considerations. People are unhappy. Why? Because relations are not good. They are not getting enough money, because that is why people really work in this material world. So they want fortune, and if they see misfortune, they are unhappy. They want happiness, material happiness. If they don't find material happiness, they are unhappy. Hmm. So generally it is about my convenience, what makes me happy. This is the basis for how people live. And Arjuna was also demonstrating some of these qualities, because Krishna wanted to teach us by making Arjuna an example. So we should not think Arjuna himself was in this situation. He was put into that situation. So we should also not be driven by unnecessary material compassion, because it results in misery, material happiness, my convenience, all these things. So this is how this whole scene starts, that Arjuna is caught in this and he's so overwhelmed with these feelings that he just drops his Gandiva. He says, I can't fight, Krishna. I don't think I'm doing the right thing by fighting. And when we do a material analysis of the situation, it seems like he was justified, as in he was talking fairly, as in he didn't want to kill his kinsman. What is wrong in that? He didn't want to do anything which is not going to give him happiness. What is wrong in that? He didn't want to do something which is sinful. What is wrong in that? He didn't want to live a dharmic way. What is wrong in that? The big problem here is that it was all self-centered. So there was no consideration of Krishna or bhakti. That was Arjuna's problem, because Krishna wanted the fight, because dharma samsthapanarthaya. So he wanted Kauravas and Pandavas to fight, so that all the adharmic people are eliminated and only dharmic people remain, because Krishna doesn't want adharma in this creation. So while Arjuna's considerations seem to be okay, they were wrong only because they did not factor in Krishna's consideration or Krishna's desire or Krishna's pleasure. Right? Like that, we also, our main focus in our life should be Krishna's pleasure, not our own pleasure, not our own happiness. Right? So this is the first point. First point to be learned. We should live with an intention to please Krishna, not with a view of our view of our own enjoyment. Okay, this is the first point. Second point, in the first chapter, Arjuna is also worried, saying that all the elders are going to get killed. He said, see, if the elders are going to get killed, then what will happen? Elders are the ones who are aware of family tradition. And if elders are killed, all the family tradition is destroyed. If family tradition is destroyed, family tradition means what? All these puja and this and that, all that happens in the family. Elders are the ones who guide these things. Of course, in Kali Yuga, most elders also are not aware of all this, because they think it's old fashioned. But previously, elders used to be responsible for this culture, to transfer them from one generation to another. So Arjuna was concerned, saying that if elders are killed, family tradition will get destroyed. If family tradition gets destroyed, family will engage in irreligion, because then they don't know what is religion, dharma, dharma consideration will be lost, and they will engage in irreligion. And what will happen if they engage in irreligion? If they engage in irreligion, then generally there is what is called as unwanted progeny. So unwanted progeny is Varna Sankara. Varna Sankara is basically, there are two reasons. One is when when dharma is not there, then there are a lot of men who want to misuse, women, right? And so we hear about it in news and etc. etc. Right? So many incidents happen because of unscrupulous men, right? And that is one result of irreligion. The other result of irreligion is that men and women marry each other irrespective of consideration of varna and ashrama. So previously there used to be a consideration. There used to be what is called as pratiloma and anuloma marriages. So there was Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. A lower varna man could not marry a higher varna female women. Like for example, a Kshatriya doesn't normally marry a Brahmana girl. Um, and there are various, I mean, very strict rules about who can marry whom, etc., etc. Now, because of adharma, what happens is anybody ends up marrying anybody else, and this results in what is called as varna sankara, which is unwanted progeny. And this varna sankara is a major problem because it actually destroys the whole peace and prosperity of the world. Because varna sankara, they are called unwanted progeny. They are not required because they don't know. They are basically demons, so to speak. And most of Kali Yuga is this. Most of Kali Yuga is unwanted progeny. That is why we see so much of really. I mean, how many people really know what is right, what is wrong, what should be done, what should not be done? Nobody really bothers about all this because mostly people are Kalo Shudra Sambhavaha. Because in Kali Yuga, everybody is the lowest grade. They don't know what is right or what is wrong. And when such people, such children are born, they give up all family tradition, community welfare projects, everything is destroyed. So Arjuna was very concerned, saying that, we should not have this battle and kill all the elders because it's going to result in the whole family tradition and community welfare society, everything will get destroyed. And which we actually see in Kali Yuga, that people are so degraded. They just want to do whatever they like. You ask anybody, I just like this, so I'm doing it. Whether right, wrong, nothing, no consideration. And people want to eat whatever. Actually, in Bhagavatam, we will read when we start Bhagavatam. He says that Bhagavatam, this whole process of eating, sleeping, mating, defending, which is common for animals and humans, these things have a place and time. Bhagavatam says that human beings will engage in these activities anywhere and everywhere. And this is considered very degraded. Luckily for us, still in India, the opposite genders, they don't openly mix in public. I mean, it's coming slowly and steadily, but in the West, it is so rampant. I mean, so much of intimacy is demonstrated in public, right? And all this is degradation. This is animal life. It's like, if there are dogs on the street, they don't bother about all this. They will engage in their acts irrespective of where they are. Human beings are becoming like this, then it's not different from animals. Eating also, there is no time for eating. There's no place for eating. There is no menu for eating, as in just whatever you see, whatever you like. This is degraded life. Vedic life is very disciplined. I mean, you eat maximum twice or maximum thrice a day, maximum. Not like whenever one feels like, keep putting something, munching. All the time, mouth has to be moving. Bubble gum, something or the other, chatpata. This is all degraded. Sleeping also, like people work in call centers, they sleep when other people are awake. They work when other people are asleep. All these are signs of degradation. And Arjuna was concerned about this. Arjuna said, if all this, if this war happens, all elders are killed, these issues are going to happen. He's so far-sighted, so far-sighted. Of course, Krishna also knew that, but Krishna had a more pressing reason, which was there are already adharmic people in Dwapar Yuga. So He wanted to eliminate them first, and then of course whoever remains would have been uh, you know pious people, and through them the traditions and etc. would have been maintained. So that was, so he knew why he was doing. So this is another very important thing that we should try and maintain. See, Krishna consciousness today actually is bringing us back to some of these age-old traditions, etc. Of course, not very too much of karmakanda processes, but it's bringing us back to our roots, in terms of maybe dressing style, in terms of type of food that we eat, in terms of practices that we do. Our overall focus, right, is changes when we come into Krishna consciousness. Like I was discussing with some devotees, saying that if you just look at ourselves before and after coming into Krishna consciousness, there's a sea of difference, how we were before and how we are now. So this is obviously a very important consideration, that the society should not be degraded, family tradition should not be lost, but we can protect it only if people become Krishna conscious. Because the process of Krishna consciousness brings about a consciousness change in people, which is not possible otherwise. Normally people cannot change themselves to this degree. Like it's like a U-turn for them. So in the first chapter, basically Arjuna is expressing all these concerns, the reasons why he should not be fighting, and what is the repercussion of this fight. So this is first chapter. Now in second chapter, there are a lot of instructions. Any questions so far from anybody? Because a lot of stuff that has to be digested. Anybody has any questions?
No.
Okay. 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 Now in the second chapter, actually, Krishna starts speaking. So the first thing Krishna tells Arjuna is, where have these impurities come upon you? You are a Kshatriya. You are people called Aryans. Aryans means those um, who know the value of life, who know why they are born, what is the goal of life. So they're called Aryans. So Krishna tells Arjuna, saying that you are acting like an Anaryan, like a non-Aryan. You don't seem to know the value of life. You don't seem to know the reason why we exist. While you're supposed to know, because you're a Kshatriya, and Kshatriya is very responsible. King is a representative of God. So you should have known these things. So the way you are behaving is full of impurities. These are impurities. And he is asking him, how come these impurities came upon you? Why? Because he has such a great parentage from both mother side, father side. Then his own brother Yudhishthir Maharaj, upholder of dharma. Then Krishna himself is there with Arjuna. In spite of all this, all these impurities came upon him. So Krishna is asking, where have these impurities come upon you? So this is first lesson, that we should also know what is the goal of life. We should become Aryans. We should not live like cats and dogs. Then he says, you give up this petty weakness of heart. Whatever you're demonstrating is petty weakness. It's not real necessary. It's just very petty, small, insignificant. And it's a weakness of heart. You are not wanting to fight, not because of any big reason. Because Arjuna was trying to substantiate, saying, this is the reason, that is the reason I should not fight. Krishna is saying it's just petty weakness of heart. Just give it up. Give it up, get up and fight. So we should also understand this, saying that we are also stuck in this, material attachment to material things, family, society. It's of no use. I mean, it is just petty weakness, and without knowing goal of life, we are just attached to all these material things. We are not going to make any progress. So if you're fortunate enough, we might continue to get a human birth next life. Otherwise, we might just be degraded and get a human animal life. So he's telling, give up this petty weakness of heart. That means that know what is the goal of your life, work towards it. Don't get stuck with material view of life. Like Arjuna was doing, oh, I want money, I want, I want happiness. This is what people are living for. This is weakness of heart because this is no use. And one should know that anyway, whatever he has to get, he's going to get. He doesn't have to over endeavor for that. But more importantly, one needs to know what is the goal of life and one needs to work towards it. And when we are working towards it, we get a lot of, we are faced with a lot of challenges, from people around us, from society, from relatives, saying, why you're doing all this bhakti? It's too early right now for you to do all this. You become old, then you take up all this bhakti and all that. So Krishna is saying, give up your petty weakness of heart. Don't get come affected by all these people and what they say. Know the goal of life, work towards it. So then Krishna, Arjuna is making so many arguments. Then finally he's fed up. He says, oh, I'm confused. Krishna, I don't know which is better. I don't know whether I should fight, I should not fight. And then what he does, the most important thing that all of us have to do is, Arjuna says, I'm confused about my duty. So I'm asking you, Krishna, to tell me what is best for me. I have surrendered to you. I've become your disciple. Please instruct me. So this is the first stage really of uh, going towards the goal of life, is that first realize that I don't seem to know what is the goal of life. I need to be guided. I also need to surrender to a guru. I need to surrender to a guru and I need to take his instructions. And relationship with guru and between guru and disciple is generally serious. Guru instructs, disciple has to follow. Disciple word itself comes from this word discipline. First of all, we have to acknowledge saying that I need to surrender. Second, I need to understand saying that I need somebody to guide me. I can't become my own teacher like a lot of people want to do in Kali Yuga. I am my own teacher. No, we can't be our own teachers because we are so we are stuck. Right? Normally, when we have a problem, we cannot see clearly the solution for our problem. But when somebody else has the problem, we can see the same situation. We can see better solutions. Or when we are in problem, when we approach somebody else seem to be able to give us better solutions. Right? So we should surrender to a guru and we should take his instruction. Very important. Then what does a guru do? Guru is not going to speak very kind words, nice words. Of course, guru might be externally, he can be soft spoken, etc., etc. But his job is to cut our unnecessary attachment to this material world. Help us see the goal of life. Make sure that we can work towards it. Give us the instructions that are given in the Shastra. So similarly, Krishna chastises Arjuna, saying that you are speaking learned words. You are acting like a pandit, but you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Because you are mourning for the body. You're not looking at the soul and you don't have a clear understanding of what is dharma. This is not worthy of grief. Because those who are wise, they don't lament for the living or dead because they understand all that is just connected to the body. So Guru is chastising his disciple. And then Krishna speaks the first instruction of Bhagavad Gita, or which is called as the ABCD of spiritual life, which is we are all spirit souls. And he says we are all spirit souls and we are just changing bodies. And the final change of body in one life is called death, when this gross body is given up and we take up another body. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. So we should not be affected by things related concerned with this body too much. For example, if somebody is unwell, okay, go to the doctor, take medicine, etc. But don't be completely just focused on that problem itself. Main focus needs to be bhakti. All these are just distractions, and we need to just engage with them as much as is required, not more. So this is the first thing, saying we are the body, we are not the body, we are spirit soul. And then Krishna tells, saying that, okay, since you have this body which is temporary, body is going to give you a lot of trouble. Body is the vehicle for all our suffering and happiness also. So Krishna gives the most important instruction for all of us. He says, tolerate. Tolerate all your happiness and distress, not just distress. He also says, tolerate happiness. Why? Because if you can't tolerate happiness and if you're jumping in ecstasy when good things are happening, we will also go down. We'll get depressed when we are in difficult situations. So we should be equipoised. So he says, tolerate happiness and distress because they will come and go. Because this life itself is temporary. So in the course of this life, some problem will come, it will go. Some other problem will come, it will go. Tolerate. It is very important for us because we are always looking for shortcuts in our life. Very quick solution for everything. Fast food, headache, just pop a crocin in. This is not going to help. We need to tolerate. Okay, if I can manage the headache, okay, then let me not take crocin. You should understand that this body is the vehicle for all our problems, source of all our problems. And getting disentangled with this body is the first step in spiritual life. That is why Krishna is saying you are not this body. Your body is a vehicle. Don't become so attached to your body. Don't think that you are the body. Most people in Kaliva or most people in this material world, they live thinking that they're the body. So they are disturbed. They're disturbed with everything that happens to the body. And of course, body means associated with the body, right? Body, mind, family, society, etc. They're just perturbed. But we are not this body. This body is just a vehicle, right? Just like if you have a two-wheeler or a car, and if by chance, for whatever reason, something happened to the vehicle, it's not that we are just brooding over it. Oh, what happened to my vehicle? No, we will think about it and then we will keep quiet, right? We will get on with our work. So similarly, this body is like that. As long as it is functional, it is fine. If it is dysfunctional, then we need to do whatever it takes to fix it. Okay, so we need to tolerate. We should not overreact to things that happen to our body. And if we live like this, tolerating, equipoised, actually we become eligible for liberation. Like I said, so this is the most important. This is the first thing that we have to develop. And this automatically comes when, as we chant Hare Krishna, we develop this, our consciousness raises above the body. Over a period of time, it may not happen immediately. But if you're chanting 16 rounds, then we can see the difference. So we're not the body. Body is here, temporary, will change over a period of time. But the body is the source of all happiness and distress. So we should tolerate. And if we can tolerate, then we become eligible for liberation. And then Krishna talks about Atma Gnana. He says how the soul has no birth, no death. It is indestructible. It is so small that it is immeasurable. It is eternal. It pervades the whole body. And then at death, it changes, gets another body. The soul can't be burnt. It can't be cut. And it's also inconceivable. We cannot understand the soul. And he says, okay, body is sure to come to an end. Today or tomorrow, it will come to an end. So he's telling Arjuna, saying that now your decision must be first based on this. Your decision cannot be based on whether body is going to get destroyed or not, because body will anyway going to get destroyed. So your decision must be based on dharma. So he says, so you do your prescribed duty based on religious principles. And for doing that, you should not have any hesitation, even if it means killing, because that is your dharma. You're a Kshatriya, your dharma is to protect. And if require, kill to protect dharma. So he says, now do your prescribed duty. And who tells us prescribed duty is based on varnashrama, based on which varna we are, what ashrama we are in? Shastra says, tells us, varnashrama dharma tells us what our duties are, and we should stick to that. Unfortunately, in Kali Yuga, we have no idea about this, and we are just living literally, like I said, like Shudra Sambhavaha. All of us are lowest grade of human beings. Previous yugas were all like more cultured people, not like Kali Yuga. So it says, do your prescribed duty. Don't decide based on bodily, just whether body is going to be alive or not. That's not the consideration. We are all souls, we are eternal, and our duty here in this material world is that we should first just stick to our duty. And he says, if you don't do your prescribed duty, whatever has been given to you or whatever you need to actually do, you will incur sins. So Arjuna was thinking, by fighting, I will incur sin. Krishna is saying, by not fighting, you will incur sin, because fighting is your religious principle. By not fighting, you will incur sin for neglecting your duties. So we should remember, we should know our duty, we should not neglect our duty. Okay. So this is the first level of work. Now he's talking about how one should work in this material world. So first thing is, we should know what our prescribed duty is, and we should work. We should do that prescribed duty, because not doing will result in sin. Next he says, you work. This is called Nishkama Karma Yoga. Nishkama Karma. He says you work without expecting any results, without consideration of happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. So first he just said, do your prescribed duty. Now he is saying, do prescribed duty without considering happiness or distress. Because Arjuna was saying, okay, I would have said, okay, this might be my prescribed duty, but this is giving me unhappiness. Krishna is saying it doesn't matter. You should do your prescribed duty, irrespective of whether that gives you happiness or distress, whether you are going to lose or gain, or whether there's victory or defeat. Because by doing that, you will not incur sin. Like I said, this papa, consciousness of not wanting to do a wrong thing was there, very prevalent previously. Every action, everybody used to be concerned, oh, is this good, is this bad? So then Krishna says, you should do bhakti yoga, or he calls it buddhi yoga, which is using intelligence to connect with the Lord. Till now, he was just saying, you just work, because you are not the body, you are spirit, soul, you have prescribed duty, you work without expecting results, without considering happiness, distress. Now he's saying, you do buddhi yoga, which means with your work, you connect with the Supreme. So work is of no use if there is no connection with the Supreme Lord. Because the idea of all work, the idea of this whole material creation is to take us back to Krishna. So if our prescribed duties don't connect us back to Krishna, then our prescribed duties are useless. So here Krishna is saying, do buddhi yoga. Use your buddhi to connect your work to Krishna. There are two ways of connecting work to Krishna. One is by knowing what is required in Krishna consciousness under the, like I said, under the guidance of a guru, and guru says, okay, you can serve Krishna in this way. You will engage that way. Or by using the output, which is salary coming from our work or income coming from our work, we use that in Krishna service. That is also karma yoga. Now there is also one more meaning to this buddhi yoga, which is called bhakti yoga. So Krishna is also telling Arjuna, saying that you should also engage in activities of bhakti. All your action should be for the pleasure of the Lord, not simply just offering the results to Krishna. You should also do things which please the Supreme Lord. And he says, in this endeavor, if you engage in bhakti yoga, there is no loss or diminution. And even if you make a little advancement, it will protect you from the greatest type of fear. Greatest type of fear is falling down from human form of life. Many people think that death is the greatest form of fear. No, Death, not necessarily. If you're going to come back, get back human form of life next birth, then it's okay. But worse than that is to lose human form of life. And if we engage in bhakti yoga, then guaranteed we are going to have another human birth. And he also says those who take up this path of yoga, bhakti yoga, they're very resolute in purpose. Their aim is one. They want to achieve Krishna and they work towards it. And he says, people who have multiple things that they want to achieve, their intelligence is multi-branch. They don't focus. They can't focus on one thing. It is very important for devotees. We have to become single-pointed focus. That this is the most important thing in our life. Other things will happen. Krishna's will, it will happen. And he also says that in the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, sense enjoyment, material opulence, sense enjoyment, material opulence, and they're bewildered by these things. Oh, this is so nice. Oh, I got this. Oh, this, that. Oh. They're bewildered. Such people, they cannot fix themselves in devotional service. They cannot fix themselves in bhakti. They will get distracted. They'll get distracted by, okay, maybe I will earn some more money, then I'll come to bhakti. Or they keep engaging themselves in sense enjoyment, so they can't focus on bhakti. Because sense enjoyment is like pouring water. When you're doing bhakti, you are actually kindling the fire. And when you do sense enjoyment, you're pouring water to that fire. So he cannot make real progress. So if you want to make real progress in bhakti, then we should not get too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence. Okay. Then he says that all these considerations, these are all, this whole world is made up of three modes: Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, Tamoguna. So he says you should transcend these modes. Go above these modes. Act in such a way that you will transcend these modes. That should be the goal of work. Work should help us transcend these modes. And you also be free from dualities. All this happiness, distress, loss, gain, victory, defeat. Become free from that. And you also become free from all anxieties of gain for gain and safety. Most people are worried about it. What will I gain? Will I gain? Get this? What about future? What will happen to the future? I want to protect myself, my family, etc. So Krishna is saying, don't be free from these dualities, free from access for gain and safety, and you be established in the self. Know that you are the soul. Know that you don't belong to this material world. Know that you are part and parcel of Krishna. Know that your duty is to serve Krishna and engage in that. Right? And with respect to duty, he still says you have the right to perform your duty, but you are not entitled for the fruits. People work mostly for fruits. Krishna is saying you're not entitled for fruits. You will get whatever you're supposed to get. Don't be think that you're entitled to get the result, and don't consider yourself the cause of the action also. Many people, oh, I did this. Krishna is saying no. Subsequently, we'll understand there are 5 reasons for action, any action. And he also says, okay, just because I'm telling you, don't be, and you're not entitled for the fruits. You also cannot say that I will not do work at all. What is the point? If I can't focus on if I can't work for results, then I will not work. No, you can't do that also. So he's very clearly saying, describing how we should work. We should work as a matter of duty. We should work without expecting any results. We should work without considering happiness, distress, all the dualities, loss, victory, etc. We should not consider ourselves the cause of the activity. And we should not be attached to not doing our duty also. And if one lives like this and alongside does bhakti yoga, till when he is in grahastha ashrama, he'll have to work because to maintain family, etc. So one works in this mood. And then subsequently and parallelly, he's also engaging in activities of bhakti yoga. And Krishna also says, okay, now while you're living life like this, you don't do bad things. Keep abominable activities far away. So he says, these are mainly, 4 pillars of adharma, which is meat eating, intoxication, illicit relations, and gambling. Keep these things far away. Don't do these things. And with clean consciousness, you surrender to Krishna. Surrender to me. It says one who engages in this kind of a life, devotional life. This is devotional life. Working as a matter of duty, using the results in Krishna service, also parallelly engaging in bhakti yoga. He says one who lives life like this, he gets rid of all karma phala in this life itself. This is the art of work. Yes, people should work, but they should also know the art of doing work. And Krishna is saying this is the art of doing work. Why should you do like this? Because people, great sages, devotees in the past, they have freed themselves from the results of all work and they've gone back to Godhead. They've gone back to Vaikuntha. Therefore, you should engage in this. And if you engage in this kind of activity, you will become Sthita Pragna. You will have fixed consciousness. This is called divine consciousness. So when Krishna speaks about divine consciousness, Arjuna says, oh, what is this divine consciousness? Can you explain? What are the symptoms of a person who is in divine consciousness? So we will observe this as we practice bhakti. We will come to this platform. So just here, these are the qualities we should develop. If you have all not already developed, we should develop in the course of time. Okay. First, we should not have any desires for sense gratification. We should not have any desires. And even if there are desires, if desires come because of our previous vasanas, our previous conditioning from previous lives, etc., we should not get affected by them. We should ourselves not develop some desire, new desire. And if some desire comes, we should not get affected by them. We should control our senses as per plan by experiencing higher taste. Higher taste is engaging in Krishna consciousness. Like I said, each and every organ, eyes should see the Lord and become enlivened, become happy. Ears should hear Kirtan, should hear about glorification of the Lord and should become happy. Like this, all the senses should become enlivened, should experience a higher taste in Krishna consciousness. Then we can control those senses when they are disturbed by lower tastes. Then such a person, he is not disturbed in the midst of disturbance, threefold miseries, problems, happiness. He is not disturbed. He is equipoised. And he is also free from any kind of material attachment, fear, or anger. Because his attachment, fear, and anger will take us to hell. He also gives up all sense of proprietorship, no sense of mine, I and mine. So no false ego, no sense of proprietorship. One who lives like this, he gets the complete mercy of the Lord. He becomes satisfied and he can attain real peace. And Krishna says in the last verse of second chapter that even if one achieves this position just before their death, they will come to the spiritual kingdom. Okay, so this second chapter is also called as summary of Bhagavad Gita, summary of Gita content summarized. So just quickly, I will just recap in next 2-3 minutes what we discussed today. So first is we should not be entangled in material attachments, material sense enjoyment, material, anything to do with this material body, because we are not this body. We are spirit soul. We should know the goal of our life, which is to go back to Krishna, which is to the servants of Krishna. We should serve Krishna. That is the goal of our life. And if there are difficulties, we should fight. We should give up weakness of heart, unwillingness to follow the path. We should fight for it because this is what we're supposed to be doing. We should surrender to Guru and take his instructions. Then we should tolerate all kinds of problems that come in our life because we are bound to experience problems. And we should do our prescribed duty just as a matter of duty, not expecting, not thinking that we are entitled for results, not considering happiness, distress, victory or defeat. And not considering ourselves as the cause of the activities and not becoming lazy and not doing our duty also. So we should do our duty without expecting any results. Parallelly, we should also do bhakti yoga Because by living a life like this is devotional life. It uh, protects us from going down to lower species. So we'll be guaranteed human form of life even if we don't achieve complete perfection. And living a life like this, parallelly, we should also not, we should give up all the bad activities which are called adharma. Four main bad activities are illicit sex, intoxication, then gambling and meat eating. And in this consciousness, we surrender to the Lord. And if we do this, we actually eventually get rid of all our sufferings, all our good and bad reactions, and we will achieve divine consciousness. And then we'll go back to Krishna. Hmm. Such a person who achieves this divine consciousness is not affected by sense gratification. He is not affected by flow of desires. He experiences higher taste. He is not affected by lower tastes. He is not ill. He is equipoised in happiness and distress. He becomes free from attachment, fear, and anger, and he gives up all sense of I and mine. And if one lives like this, we can achieve the complete mercy of the Lord. Okay, so this is the summary of the first and second chapters. Anybody has any questions? Was it too much or was it okay?